Hello and welcome to On Brand with Alf and me, Rory Sutherland. Each month I'll be talking to household names as well as challenger brands about success, their challenges and future opportunities in the advertising, marketing and media industries. Now today I'm joined by Ruth Snowdon-Gough, Chief Marketing Officer at Hain Celestial, the international parent company for Hain Daniels Group, which you may not have heard of, but it's actually one of the UK's leading food companies. Ruth spent most of her career in FMCG, including several years with Mars. In 2017, she joined the marketing team at Hain Daniels Group, working across the chilled, frozen and ambient food and drink categories. Now you're going to be asking, okay, give me some brands. Well, Hain Daniels Group has an extensive what's called dawn to dusk portfolio of products, food for every meal, including Sunpat, Linda McCartney's, new Covent Garden Soup Company and many, many more. Their legacy brands too, such as Hartley's Jam and Robertson's Golden Shred Marmalade, date back to the 19th century, with the latter also being awarded a royal warrant. As well as producing iconic British products, the company are continually innovating to meet evolving consumer needs and trends. So Ruth, it's great to have you on the podcast. I've got to ask the first question, where does the Celestial come from in Hain Celestial?
That comes from our Celestial seasonings business in the States.
I see. So Hain, the overall group is a mixture of American and British brands, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of Hain Celestial Group is a kind of leading health and wellness company with the purpose really to inspire kind of healthier living for people, communities and the planet through better for you brands. I think what's unique about our company is we've been working and operating in the better for you space for kind of over 30 years, but our business has very much grown through acquisition. And until relatively recently, we've been operating as quite independent businesses. But in September 23, Hain Celestial unveiled a kind of multi-year strategy called Hain Reimagined, aimed at transforming our company into a globally integrated kind of scalable enterprise.
And so the acquisitions, we've mentioned quite a few of them. Are there any more you'd like to name check as well in terms of recent acquisitions, particularly in the UK?
I mean, in the UK, I think the brands that people will have heard of. So we've been working with Linda McCartney Foods under license since 2006, new Covent Garden Soup since 2011, Hartley's 2012, Cully and Sully, our soup brand, Ella's Kitchen, Yorkshire Provender and Clark's. So the list goes on and on and on. And we're incredibly fortunate. We're in about 62% of all Brits' cupboards, fridges and freezers. So chances are you've got one of our brands at home too.
And I can see behind you, you've got Joya, which I'm assuming is a soy milk. Is that right?
It is. So it's a plant-based milk brand. So in Europe, we have Joya, one of the number 3 brand in Austria. We also have Natumi, which is the number 1 brand in Germany in healthcare, and Lima, which is actually a top 10 bio brand in France. So yes, we've got a big portfolio in Europe as well.
Bio being the French for organic, is that right?
Correct,
it's
yes.
Biologique, that's it, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I mean, the interesting thing is that it's a very, very interesting portfolio. It's obviously quite future-facing. In particular, I suppose we ought to talk about, well, I suppose we ought to talk particularly about the trend towards meat-free or at least low meat consumption. I think there are two parallel trends. Someone I know did work on this, and beef farmers were always blaming vegetarians for the decline in beef sales. And after doing some research, it actually seemed that vegetarianism was a small part of the decline. The bigger part of the decline was a huge trend towards meals with much, much less meat. If you consider pizza, for example, meat is used as a kind of garnish or topping. It's not anymore a fundamental part of a meal. And that trend seems to be pretty strong, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So we continue actually to see a kind of big shift towards meat-free eating since 2016. We've actually seen 1 billion more meat-free evening meal occasions in the UK. And whilst as an industry, we've spoken a lot about kind of the environmental benefits of eating less meat, the primary reason for consumers is actually around health and the perception that eating more plant-based food is better for them, better for their families.
And so and I suppose your soups are not all vegetarian, are they?
Nope.
But again, the quantity of meat in a meat soup is kind of measured. I mean, is there a particular focus? Because one of the things I've been trying to argue is that I suspect that soup eating is a pretty good thing in general because it has quite a low glycemic load, if I'm right. it's slow to digest precisely because it's effectively macerated. And so it takes much longer for your body to digest it than, what you might call more kind of, how would I describe it, monolithic foodstuffs. Okay. And consequently, you stay full longer. I've been arguing as an experiment, I've never got anybody to do it, but maybe you will, that if you actually attempted a diet where you started most meals with soup, you would find people actually eating less and indeed probably more healthily as well. That actually the disappearance of soup as a first course, which was the historical default first course, probably wasn't a great thing.
Yeah, I think partly that, but I think what we are seeing is an increase in soup eating as a kind of really quick, healthy lunch. And we're seeing more and more people turn to soup precisely for the reasons you're talking about. It's packed full of veggies,
yes,
low glycemic load, and often stacks up pretty well from a protein perspective. And if you compare that nutritionally versus something like a sandwich, then there are very, very clear health benefits from eating soup primarily as your meal versus a sandwich alternative.
And with the probable additional advantage that it takes time to eat it as well. I mean, you could theoretically chug soup, but people generally don't. And so I've always wondered, I said, is this one of these cases where the solution is too simple, that it's staring us in the face? And also, as you said, it's probably a good way to consume meat in healthy quantities without overdoing it. There's a parallel, I think, also with the vegetarian food market, which is, it's difficult to imagine this now, but if you were a vegetarian even in my childhood, 1970s or 80s, okay, it involved almost massive sacrifice of taste and interest. Okay, I mean, there were vegetarians in the 19th century, in the 1920s. I think George Bernard Shaw was famously vegetarian. There were always these early parts of the movement. But in the England of 1920, it must have meant unbelievably tedious and indeed not very nutritional in many cases, diets, because the vegetarian meal would often be a meat-based meal with the meat removed. I mean, famously, Ramanujan, the great mathematician who was transported to Cambridge, basically suffered extraordinary health problems, in part because he was obviously vegetarian, and trying to have a vegetarian diet in early 20th century Cambridge just didn't work. Then there was a sort of trend where vegetarianism, I think, was almost a form of self-denial. I had vegetarian friends who said they hated vegetarian restaurants because they always said they were restaurants for people who didn't like food. That there was a kind of hair-shirtedness, self-sacrifice to the whole thing. And one of the most important things that's happened, let's be honest, is there are ethical reasons to be vegetarian or to have a low-meat diet. There are health reasons. But it's no bad thing if people can also be vegetarian for reasonably selfish reasons, which is that the food is a hell of a lot more interesting. So with Linda McCartney in particular, how are you innovating there to keep that relevant? Because obviously you started not quite dominating the category, but you were certainly a huge part of the category, and the category has kind of exploded around you. What do you do there to keep relevant? It's a bit similar to sort of, the Gordon's Gin issue, which is, it's great news for the category growth, but category share becomes harder and harder, I suppose.
Yeah, I think let's start with the consumer, right? So today, about 50% of the value of our category comes from vegetarians and vegans, like myself. So I've been veggie for now nearly 40 years now. And 50% of the category comes from meat reducers. And therefore, the needs are subtly different. But ultimately, food is about pleasure and enjoyment. And if we want to convert more people from eating meat to eating meat-free, which, as you says, has health benefits and environmental benefits for all of us, then ultimately it comes down to creating food that is so delicious that you don't miss meat. And that's where our focus was when Linda founded the brand in 1991 and continues to be today. So our view is always, we want to make something that is absolutely delicious, that fills that hole in the center of the plate where meat used to sit, and that all of your friends just talk about how wonderful it is rather than, oh, well, that was a meat-free meal. And if we do that, and if we become more and more price accessible, and we continue to ensure that our product is healthier than the alternative, why wouldn't you switch? And that's the mission that drives us.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's one of those categories, very similar to frozen food, actually, which is it's the victim of completely unfair stigmatization in some cases. Another interesting category like that is, of course, low alcohol or no alcohol beer. And one of the most interesting innovations, I think, in those categories was not really a product innovation, although product innovation was immensely important. It was the marketing innovation of not apologizing. In other words, Lucky Saint, I was speaking to Lucky Saint, and they said our great success, they think, was that they sold it as a beer that happened to be low in alcohol, rather than as, it's got no alcohol. And the natural weird thing in the human brain is the tendency to assume a trade-off. If it's got less of something, or it's healthier, it's going to be less tasty. And we automatically assume those trade-offs. And I think sometimes the marketing task is actually just to break through this, which is to say, no, this is a choice, it's not a compromise.
Correct. And also for people to try it, right? So if you think about our category and how much the category has evolved technologically in the last kind of 10, 15 years, what someone might have come in and tried 10 or 15 years ago and maybe didn't have the best of experiences with, hopefully not with Linda McCartney, but with some of the other alternatives out there, the world has moved on significantly, meaning that, I now make a spaghetti bolognese at home. Everyone eats it. I'm the only one in my family who's vegetarian. Nobody else seems to miss the meat. And I think it's just because it's a great dinner, right? It's a great family favorite. And that's the way we need to start talking about plant-based and meat-free. We need to be a lot more confident about how delicious it truly is. And we need to reduce those barriers for consumers at every single turn. So whether that's going out and sampling the product, we run Love Me or I'm Free pretty continuously across our range so that we're offering real risk-free trial for our consumers.
Is in the UK, is our outsized love of ethnic food also an opportunity in a sense? Because, in some ways, if something is really flavoursome, whether that's achieved with herbs and spices rather than with core ingredients, that's also an opportunity. I mean, it always interests me that if you look at Gusto, which is also a very, very, very interesting food business indeed, all the more interesting because in a way it doesn't make sense because logically you could get a cookbook, compile the ingredients, cook the food. But there's something about having the ingredients right there in the right proportions that just pushes you over the edge and forces you to cook the meal, which you subsequently then enjoy enormously.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're filling a need that also, let's be honest, our education system for many generations, we've not been teaching kids how to cook and giving, the adults of now the skills to be able to necessarily cook. I think what Gusto does very cleverly, and HelloFresh and all of the others, is break down that barrier, which makes it feel easier because some of the hard work has been done and the recipes are really easy to follow. And that's exactly what we do. I mean, we partner at the moment with Cook School, and we go into schools every single year teaching kids, working with, Mary McCartney helps us with recipe development.
Oh, wow. I didn't know this. So it's still a family business.
Absolutely. The family are still absolutely involved. But we go in and we teach kids how to make really brilliant tasting, easy vegetarian food. Because often kids are really interested. When we poll kids, 7 out of 10 say, I want to try more meat-free meals, don't always know where to start. So how do we really lean in and support that generation in exploring food and getting a really healthy relationship with food early?
In a way, what probably happened is that there was an original, going back to my childhood, stereotype that actually cooking teaching was a girls' school activity. And the tragedy was that, when education became completely co-educational, it seemed to fall out of the mix because it would seem to be an entirely sensible thing to teach.
It's a life skill.
It's a complete life skill. As with, financial education and cooking education are two things which are of absolutely daily importance. Okay. I always make this point, about what I was taught in high school maths, which is I was taught a load of things, to do with, working out the surface area of a cone, which I've never had to use once. The statistics stuff I learned is pretty much valuable every day. And no one seems to ask this question about education, which is, okay, let's look at the time taken to educate these people in something versus the value it provides over time in the course of their lives, whether it's something which is valuable daily, like a cooking skill or some financial literacy, Or let's be honest, the likelihood you'll need to work out the surface area of a cone is pretty low. And if you do need to do it, you can Google the solution. In any case, okay, it's not really something you need to carry around in your head just in case. And so this is actually really, really interesting, because I think this Cook School partnership is fantastic. How do they operate? It's a charity, is it, or is it?
Yeah, it's a not-for-profit.
Not-for-profit, yeah.
It's a not-for-profit that goes in and tries to educate kids and support kids in the basic skills of cooking, because, there aren't as many hours as there need to be in school dedicated to this. So they go in with the ingredients. We provide the ingredients, the recipes, and really fun lessons so that the kids can make something fantastic and then take it home for their family to enjoy in the evening. And that hopefully sparks a joy and an excitement in creating food that will last them for their whole life, and certainly piques their interest.
Yeah, in terms of potential return, I mean, we all also remember there's a whole industry around this skill too, which is a massively good, highly meritocratic employer, where you have, if you can cook, you have an incredibly portable skill. So the education system does seem increasingly bizarre when you look at it from the standpoint of an alien. You kind of go, well, 50% of this stuff is absolutely vital, and 50% of it seems to be just performed for reasons of tradition or, ritual, or simply because that's what the exams are in. Come to think of it, I wish I'd done much more, because I realised, there were certain things I could do, but I was woefully ignorant in terms of, by the way, food hygiene as well.
Yes.
And that's probably another bonus of vegetarian food, which is there's slightly less food waste.
There is definitely less food waste. And I think it's those skills. I mean, I remember when I turned vegetarian, I remember coming home and saying to my mum, I'm going to be vegetarian. I was 10.
My daughter did the same thing I think she was about 8. Yeah.
Yeah. And she said, wonderful. So you're going to need to work out what you want to eat tonight then, but it forced me to go and explore and play and create food. And she supported me very much in that. So whilst the rest of my family aren't vegetarian, I had all of the encouragement and let's be honest, the ingredients and the time to be able to go and play and experience food. And that's created in me a lifelong love of food. And hence the reason I've worked now in the food industry for over 25 years. I think it's a hugely important part of life. All our most important connections often happen around and associated with food. And if we can play a part in that, in creating food that helps you connect with others, that is delicious and is also better for you, then I think we're making a true difference in terms of helping people have healthier lives.
Top 2 challenges, brought to you by Alf Insight.
Alf Insight helps media owners, agencies and marketing service providers improve their new business pipelines by equipping them with in-depth insights, accurate information and daily news updates on the leading and challenger brands in the UK. Alf now also helps sports clubs, venues and charities win new partnership deals. Alf Insight identifies the brands to target at the right time, providing everything you need to tailor the perfect pitch. Visit Alf Insight, that's alfinsight.com, or click the link in the episode description to find out more. Hain Daniels Group has this mission to prioritise the growth of purpose-driven brands and champion other sustainability and well-being initiatives through partnering with a range of charities and not-for-profits. So how do you balance driving product sales with ethical and sustainable goals? Or indeed, do you not see it as a contradiction? We naturally assume these two things have to be in opposition.
Yeah, I don't see the tension. I really, really don't think I see the tension. I think they have to work together. So don't get me wrong, it's incredibly important, obviously, that we drive product sales. But long-term penetration growth or category growth, I believe, comes from winning hearts, winning minds, building propositions and winning with the retailers. It's not an either-or approach for us. So we know our consumers are demanding more of the brands they choose. And let's be honest, no one's loyal to a brand. We're loyal to repertoires of brands. But
good bit of Byron Sharp, I
I'm afraid, full convert here, I'm afraid. But
is that partly why you have two players and two brands in the soup category? So you've got Yorkshire Provender and you've got Covent Garden, for example.
And Cully and Sully. We actually have the number 1, 2 and 3 brands in the soup category.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, but each brand is different in its positioning. It has a different offer. It appeals to a different price partition within the market. But yes, that is why we believe in operating portfolios of brands. Absolutely.
I have a very weird observation, which is much against what I expect, is that I tend to lose weight when I go to the US. And the reason I lose weight when I go to the US is their salads are sufficiently pimped that I feel perfectly happy ordering a salad as a main course. Whereas in Europe, ordering a salad is a kind of act of self-denial. Okay. I mean, you might argue the Americans overdo it. I don't need a whole sliced avocado combined with bacon, combined with croutons. But do you also sell any sort of what you might call soup pimping products? Because I do think those are quite, by effectively adding a few solid ingredients to a soup after cooking, you do hack the brain into thinking this is actually a meal, it's not just a liquid.
I think it depends on the consumer group, right? So when we've done a huge amount of work on understanding our consumers and who's using soup for which occasion and who are they. And there is a massive difference here between a slightly older female who's looking for a light lunch versus some of my colleagues in the office who can eat a whole pot or will eat a whole pot with half a baguette. So I think the beauty of soup is that it has that versatility that, yes, 50% of people are eating it with a bakery item as well, or they're pimping it up with some croutons, but you can also just have a really fantastic filling. And because of the volume, 280, 300 ml of soup does actually fill you up, particularly if you're a slightly smaller individual. So I think it's wonderfully versatile.
And there is that interesting thing about the digestive system, which is by breaking something up into smaller parts, it simply takes longer to digest because there are specialist parts of the gut biome, which are optimized towards digesting different forms of nutrition. And therefore, by actually, it replicates really good chewing, if you look at it historically. But that seems to me to be a strangely important factor in the fact that one of the things that we've created is food that's very, very fast to eat.
Yep.
And something that slows things down is no bad thing. The McCartney family, you're saying, is still involved, by the way, in the brand. Do you ever have any kind of conflict between what's one of the world's sort of great sort of 20th century aristocracy in the McCartney family? I suppose you've got Stella as well. Do you ever have any brand conflict? To what extent do they actually manage their own reputation and so on?
I think we're pretty lucky, actually. So we've been working with the family since 2006, so pretty long-standing relationship.
Ah, good, yeah.
And that's important. So I think we're clear about what we bring as Hain. So we have a team that really understands the consumer, we understand the market, and we make fantastically tasty food. That's our expertise. What the family really bring is their passion for changing the way the world eats, but also the amazing creativity that they have. So I think as long as we're, again, incredibly fortunate, we have access to an amazing archive of Linda's work, her words, her recipe. That really inspires us, all of us, and that's what unites all of us, is going back to Linda's vision and Linda's work and Linda's words. And as long as we stay true to that, we're always on the right path. But it's true, the family are absolutely still involved. So every single product we design and we develop has been signed off and tasted by Paul, Mary and Stella to this day. Every single one.
Good. Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. So they still have their stamp of approval, which they have to give before something's actually
Absolutely.
launched.
And there are always discussions in that point of, well, can we all have different flavor preferences, right? So we can say, well, this is the consumer testing we've done. This is how we're driving juiciness. This is how we're the strength of flavor. We all have certain, Paul doesn't particularly like peppers, or I might not particularly like, strong garlic, but we can understand what it's doing for the consumer, and therefore, is it delicious ultimately?
Got it. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. It's great because the fact that their name is still and the signature is still on the box. I was going to talk, actually, funny, talking about the box, I was going to talk about packaging. So, as we know, packaging plays this extraordinary role in altering our perception of products. In fact, one of the best ways to innovate, or rather to signal significant difference in a product, which I think Charlie Bigham did rather brilliantly, is you fundamentally create a new form of packaging, which just automatically prompts kind of reappraisal. So whether it's new Covent Garden Soup Company, say, or the cartons, or you've got the more premium chilled soup section, or, of course, I think you also have Ella's Kitchen pouches.
We
Is
do.
that right? Which are kind of portable. Is that right? So if you're feeding
Correct.
if you're feeding a child, you can carry these things in a bag and they won't burst.
Yep.
One of the most ingenious bits of packaging, by the way, which I always loved, was Froobs, which was the insight by a yogurt maker that kids like yogurt, parents liked giving their kids yogurt. What parents didn't like doing was putting a pot of yogurt and a spoon in their child's lunchbox, because they knew two things. The pot of yogurt would burst and explode over their exercise books, and the spoon would never make it back home. And consequently, the Froob, which is yogurt you can basically consume
Slurp.
from a tube, solved both those problems, which was, it solved the portability problem, the bursting problem, and the lost spoon problem all in one go. And so with the so Ella's Kitchen, actually talk some more about Ella's Kitchen, because I think it's a great brand, because I don't know what its heritage is, where it dates from, but it's certainly hit. I mean, I don't have young children anymore, but it's hit my consciousness pretty rapidly. It seems to have grown remarkably fast. You've clearly done a great job with distribution. I'd love to know a bit more.
Yeah, so Ella's Kitchen is the number one baby food brand in the UK, and a brand with incredible awareness. So just over 81% awareness. But everything we do at Ella's is about making meal times yummy and fun for little ones. So again, we know how important it is for little ones to kind of grow up loving good food. So our mission is to help children develop really healthy relationships with food, but also need to do everything we can to look after their planet so that the little ones can kind of grow up in a healthy world. We are looked to.
And by the way, great packaging design.
Brilliant packaging and super distinct.
Who did it? Do you do that in the house, or did
No,
you use
we've been working with a number of different partners over the years who have developed. So we have long-standing kind of partner agencies with our design firms who've developed that.
Because they have done it's brilliantly distinctive, and the whole design immediately says what it is and what makes it different. Without you needing to read a single word. It's one of those masterpieces, I think, of sort of on-shelf instant differentiation.
Absolutely agree.
That's interesting that it makes it to number one.
Yeah, and
Fantastic.
It permeates everything we do. So that look and feel, that tone of voice, there is absolutely consistency from the team at Ella's, and has been for a very, very long time. But I think what the team are doing incredibly well at the moment is providing support and reassurance for parents. So over 50% of parents of little ones join our Become a Friend program, and parents get kind of access and tools to resources like weaning guides and handy feeding guides for toddlers, and when their little ones reach 12 months. And we really work hard to be the trusted partner of parents through that program. We have a phenomenal team who are working on customer care. We actually talk to over 10,000 parents a month, just to give them that little bit of extra support. So we truly are a kind of trusted friend in that space. And I think that's incredibly important.
How old is it, actually? Because it seems to have reached the number one spot amazingly quickly, given that it's up against some pretty venerable brands.
Yeah, so it was acquired by Hain back in 2013. And at that point, I believe it was about 12, 13 years old. So, yeah.
Yeah, my goodness. What a success. That's fantastic, yeah.
Fantastic success.
Oh, absolutely brilliant. And I'm intrigued to know that, what did you say? So over 50% of the people actually join the programme as well?
Absolutely. 50% of parents are joining our Friends programme.
And that actually is very much a purpose-driven brand in many ways, because if people... I mean, I never know if this is true or not, but I'm always told that if you don't have Marmite before the age of 12 or something, you'll never like it. Okay? So, I've done a little bit of work with other brands on this, which is getting children to appreciate higher quality foods earlier. I mean, the most bizarre thing, if you ever want to understand where French foodiness comes from, is that you go and look at the menu at a French school. And literally, a French primary school will have the kind of,